One of the most fundamental questions people ask themselves is, what is the meaning or purpose of life? Why is there life? What's the point of life? It's a question that is hard to answer, especially since we're only a product of life. We are a product of nature. We're not standing above it. But let me give it a try anyway. The question, what is the meaning or purpose of life, is a very reasonable one to ask. But there's a problem with this question. It has an assumption built in. With this question, we assume that life has a meaning. We just don't know what it is. However, in regard to this question, I have some good news, but also some bad news. Although the bad news may be bad, or it may not be. Anyway, let's start with the maybe bad news. So the maybe bad news is, life has no meaning. It has no purpose. Let me explain. If life were to have a meaning or purpose, where would it come from? Meaning must have an origin. Who or what has determined meaning? Who or what has brought meaning into existence? And if it were to have an origin, where would that come from? To me, it makes sense to think that something cannot exist from nothing. It seems to me that something always has to precede something else. And if something always precedes something else, then the origin of meaning can never be found. Because in this way, meaning loses its meaning in the infinity where there is no end and no beginning. And something that has no beginning can never have a meaning, since there has not been an opportunity to create one from the start. So to put it more simply, because existence, or eternal existence as I like to call it, is infinite and therefore had no beginning, life that arose from this eternal existence can never have a meaning. Okay, in case I haven't explained it well enough thus far, to simplify it even further, existence is infinite, and so it had no beginning. And since there is no beginning, meaning becomes meaningless, because you can't find the first meaning, the original meaning, in a world without a starting point. So now that we know that life has no meaning, no purpose, is it actually a bad thing? On the one hand, if life were to have a meaning, but it's an unacceptable one, it would have been bad, and maybe we would be better off without one. On the other hand, living in a meaningless world might still be perceived as a bad thing. That's why I said maybe bad news. On that note though, let's move on to the good news. Even though life, in a universal sense, has no inherent meaning, we can, of course, create one ourselves. We're creative enough to think of something that can liberate ourselves from the struggle of living in a meaningless world. We can find meaning in all sorts of things, from relationships to work, to contribution to spirituality. Anything can be meaningful. Anything can make our lives valuable and significant if we think it does. What we think is meaningful is what ultimately matters. Now, we may never know why we're here, but we can determine if it's worth being here. And if one feels that it's not worth it, that their life is not meaningful, they should explore further or perhaps find someone who can show them otherwise.